Hey everybody! Today, Rahdo runs through his top 10 engine building games, which I have to admit was kind of a tough list for me to make because engine building it's kind of hard to define as a genre of game. In fact, Board Game Geek doesn't even try to do it. You can't sort games by engine building because it's kind of like saying, oh, let's top 10 resource conversion games or top 10 move in the world games. These are just like core things you do. But for some reason, the voters really wanted to see this. In the vote that chose this, the second place top 10 science fiction games was a distant second. So people really want to see me talking about engine building games for some reason. I don't know why, but I'll do my best. And so I spent quite a bit of time thinking about it and trying to come up with my own personal definition of what it means to be an engine building game. And so I eventually did. I came up with 10, and I am sure there are going to be more than a few people as they watch this video who say, hey, where's game X and Y and Z? Because, some really commonly cited games in the engine building genre are not going to be mentioned by me, like, say, Dominion, or really any deck builders, or Race for the Galaxy, or even Agricola. While most people consider them engine building games, to me, the 10 I'm talking about are really engine building games. They are not situations where, engine building is kind of there, but it's not really the focus of the game. Or, actually, there's a bunch of reasons that some really popular engine building games are not being mentioned. And, I'm not really going to go into that right now. If you want, I'll be doing my second podcast later this month. It'll probably be at the end of the month. And in that podcast, I will talk about all the games that didn't make this list and why. And so you folks can listen for that. In the meantime, right now, I'm just going to talk about the ones that did and why. And also, if you stick around to the end, as a special bonus treat, for a first time ever, Jen is going to be appearing on camera. It's not the first time she's appeared on camera, but the first time she's ever been in a top 10 video. And she is going to talk about her favorite engine building game or games. I'm not quite sure what she's going to talk about because we haven't really discussed this yet. She doesn't even know this is going to happen, I think. But we'll worry about that in a bit. So, without further ado, let's start counting down top 10 engine building games, starting with number 10, Fleet. This, I gotta say, I'm really keen on the fact that the engine in this game that you build is in the title. Your engine is a fleet of merchant fishing vessels that you are playing out in front of you on the table, and by the end of the game, you have created, if you've played well, a gigantic, an enormous fleet that is a very successful engine for the sole purpose of harvesting fish and getting you victory points. That's what the whole point of this game is. And the entirety of the game is about building this engine, this fleet, that every turn generates more points for you, more fish, and tweaking it and enhancing it, because the game at its core is actually an auction game. I've done a run through for it and its expansion. And every round, there's going to be a very tense, very tight auction. Even in a two-player game, these auctions are really good because money is super tight. And if you're not careful in Fleet, you can really screw yourself and basically pretty much ruin the entire game, bankrupt yourself and get, be up against the wall and have no chance of winning. So the auctions are very challenging to, thread the fine line between paying enough and paying too much. But in these auctions, you're basically trying to get fishing licenses that will give you the opportunity to build or to launch a fleet of ships that have to be captained, and when you successfully do this, the engine of your fleet will start collecting stuff. And the thing that makes this a very interesting engine building game for me is all those fishing licenses that you're auctioning for give your engine, your fleet, special abilities that make you better or worse, or not worse, but better in certain elements of the game. Better at being able to provide captains, better at being able to provide boats, better at being able to collect fish, whatever it is. So by the time the game is over, depending on how well you've done the auctions, you've built a very different engine than what you might have done in the previous game. And chances are your engine is very different to your opponent's as well. But more than anything else, the reason this makes the list is the sheer satisfaction you get. I mean, Fleet is such an appropriate name because when all's said and done, unless you failed miserably at the auctions, you have really created a massive fleet. I mean, this game gobbles, even though it's a simple card game, it gobbles up a ton of table real estate because you've got all these ships and they're all producing for you and they're all captain. And it's a really, really wonderful, fun, tense, and very portable. You know, it's just a deck of cards and a bunch of cubes game. And that's my number 10 engine builder, Fleet. Moving on to my number 9. I think this is the first of several games that the engine is building a city. The engine in Town Center is very, very interesting in this game. What players are trying to do is build their own little town center. And I've done a couple of run-throughs for this game. In fact, actually, have I done run-throughs for every... I have done a run-through for every single game that is in this list. So I don't have to say that anymore. You can learn more about them in, just by doing a search for my channel, and you'll find run-throughs for all these games. But Town Center is a very, very interesting game. The engine you're building is your town center. I mean, kind of the downtown section, and you can build on your outskirts, little suburbs and whatnot. Although you really want to focus on the center. If you're building into the suburbs, you're actually potentially losing points. But what's interesting about this game is every round, the better you do at building your town center, the more it... Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is an engine building game. You are building this town center that is capable of producing money and victory points. That's what this engine generates. But this is almost kind of like an engine growing game because you do all the different pieces of your town center are represented by cubes that represent commercial districts and office buildings and residential places for your people to live. And there's an interesting synergy between all the different cubes you're placing. And if you build your engine correctly, not only will it start producing money and victory points for you, but it will grow itself organically over time. If you have a situation where you put a little commercial block, which is a blue block on the board, and then you surround it by putting residential blocks adjacent to it, that commercial district, which is already going to produce money for you because it's like one of the cornerstones of your engine, will start to grow and expand on its own. This is the interesting thing about Town Center. The Town Center itself takes on a life of its own. It feels like it's organically growing and spreading like a real city. And that's something that's really, really unique, that your engine, it's under your control, but it has its own agenda, but that you try to mold and sculpt and push in a certain direction. It's very, very clever. And then on top of all that, the other thing that makes this game really special is it's a 3D puzzle for all intents and purposes. Let's see, because as you can see, the city you're building is a collection of multicolored cubes that, spread out horizontally, taking up more real estate, but also spread vertically, building higher and higher and higher into the sky. So it's a very, very interesting challenge to take into account all the building restrictions you have, all while trying to make a powerful engine that can generate you a lot of points or a lot of money or both, and that can also be healthy enough that it can grow and evolve on its own. Very, very cool. Very, very clever game. Wonderful puzzle. Also makes a great solo game too. Very much enjoy playing this by my lonesome when Jen's too busy making glass to play a game with me. So anyway, that was number 9, Town Center. And then continuing with the city building theme, let's move on to number 8, City Council. Now, this is another game where the engine is the city itself that you are building. You're laying tiles down, and there are several resources in this game that replicate a lot of stuff you don't see in a lot of other city building. I mean, for instance, the population of your city is actually broken into white-collar and blue-collar workers. And you have to focus equally on trying to bring in more kind of high-tech jobs for white-collar, but also more, blue-collar jobs too, because the white-collar citizens of your city and the blue-collar citizens of your city have very different needs. They have very different concerns. And as you are building your city, because all the players in this game are members of the city council, you're having to take their needs into account. Because if you build this city well, every round the city will run and will generate money, will generate more population. If it's a successful city, more people will come in, and that gives you more opportunities for the city to grow more and more and more. But it also generates bad stuff. It can generate crime. It can generate pollution. So it's a really interesting, multifaceted engine you're building. as the game goes, because it's capable of generating a lot of stuff. And you yourself as a player have secret hidden objectives that, well, maybe I do want to create a city that focuses more on blue collar than white collar. So I'll try to sculpt my engine to really focus on that, to give me what I need, because that's what's more important to me. Now, all of that is very, very cool, but what truly makes City Council an amazing experience, really unique, one of the most unique games I'm about to talk about today is it's a semi-cooperative game. Players are working together to build a communal engine. I think this is the only game. Every other game I'm going to talk about today, players are all building their own private engine that they run and they use to generate whatever it is over the course of the game. City Council, we are working together to make a communal engine. And the interesting thing about this is everybody's a member on a city council. We all have our own secret goals because there are lobbyists who will basically give us victory points if we can, meet certain needs. So every round, players actually actively engage in negotiations about, well, you know what? Should we add a fabrication manufacturing plant for some more blue collar jobs, or should we make this high tech, biotech firm for some more white collar jobs? And players all get to make their proposals every year at the city council meeting about how they're going to expand the city. And then players all vote. And this is a game all about negotiation. Hey, you know what? If you cast a vote my way, next turn I'll help you back whatever you need. And so the engine that we are all working together to build evolves as a result of our own selfish interests, because we all have our own lobbyists we're trying to placate. But at the same time, this is a semi-cooperative game. If we're not careful about how we expand this engine, our city that we're building, we can drive it into the ground and everybody can lose. If there's too much pollution, if there's too much crime, the federal government will kick in and we'll all get fired and everybody loses. So there's so much. This is a really fascinating, very unique game. A rare example of a semi-cooperative game that Jen and I find we really enjoy. And then on top of that, a fantastic engine building game as well, because every round, after everybody's, we've done the nominations and we've done the voting and we've expanded our engine, then we also share responsibility for running the engine, because not all portions of the engine will get run every round. And so that's another thing that players share responsibility for. Not only do we co-build the engine, but we both do maintenance on it as well. It's a cool game. I cannot recommend enough City Council. And again, I've done a run through for it if you want to check that out. So that was 10.9.8. Number 7. I think this is arguably the last. I think this is the last of, no, it's not. There will be more city building, but this is the last for a while. Prosperity, from Sebastian Bleasdale and Reiner Knizia, the doctor of design himself. Now, this is another city building game, and once again, we're back to players building their own private cities. This is set in the not too distant future as players are trying to, get their cities or their nation states or whatever they are to closer and closer to prosperity. And every round there are a collection of tiles. This is basically a tile drafting game where we're trying to get tiles and play them to our own city. And again, the city that we are building is the core engine, the engine that drives your prosperity. And the thing that's interesting about this game is you only have a limited number of spaces that you can expand your city. And over the course of the game, you will find yourself not only expanding by putting new tiles in that will generate more resources, again, population but good stuff and bad stuff, population, pollution, all of that sort of business. But you have very, very limited space. So often you'll find yourself fine-tuning your engine over the course of the game. Later in the game when you're getting these really awesome tiles that do a much better job at generating the resources you want, you might upgrade old ones, or you might keep the old ones around and say, you know what, I'm going to completely change the direction of my engine, of my city, and try to eliminate pollution. So let's get rid of those old polluting power plants, put this new one in, or to heck with it, I don't care about pollution because I've got other ways I can deal with pollution. Let's continue to focus on prosperity and despite of pollution. There's a lot of flexibility. It's a really, really clever game. And the reason it's an excellent engine building game is because, again, much like these other games, every time you play, you are going to create a new and unique engine that works very, very differently than both what your opponents have generated and what you built the last time. And because this engine is capable of, depending on how you want to operate it, going in a lot of different directions, producing a lot of different stuff, you have a lot of control. That's why this is an interesting engine building game, because the game is all about this, building your engine towards prosperity. And it's right there in the title again. Love it. All right, so that was number 10.9.8.7. Number 6, Milestones. Another lovely game. Now this one is interesting. The engine you're building is effectively a rondel. And what that means is players, we have this rondel, this is our own little personal board, and we populate it with a collection of tiles that represent workers. And each tile has 2 workers on it. Like on the left, there might be a stonemason. On the right, there might be a woodcutter. And so we put that tile, that 2-person tile, on our own little personal board so we have access to more stone and more wood. We need stone and wood. We need to have our engine, our engine of workers. We have our little collection of workers, and we need them to produce all this stuff so that we can, help basically build up the infrastructure of a shared city. And, basically, this is another thing where we're both kind of building in the same area, building up roads and milestones and markets and stuff like that, trying to score points. But the engine building element of the game is what's the most interesting, because it's this very compelling puzzle. Because you're always getting the building blocks of your engine are these 2-person tiles, and you're laying them down so that from left to right you create, every time your engine runs, which is, on your turn you basically get to choose how much of your engine runs, because you're always going clockwise around this rondel of workers that you're making. You choose, I'm going to need some wood before I need the stone, before I need the sand or whatnot. So I'll lay them down in this particular order. But the interesting thing is, every round, the king of the land looks with avarice at the perfect engine you've built for yourself and says, you know what? I'm taking that guy. And ends up taking one of your tiles. So your engine, you're constantly working on it, constantly fine-tuning it, constantly adjusting it, because you know what, early on I needed stone, but now I really need to change this engine so it'll generate more sand for me. But while you're trying to massage it and make it the perfect engine, the game itself is trying to tear it down. And so you always have to anticipate that. Well, you know what, I know the king's going to take some, I'm going to throw this in. I don't even need this monkey wrench in my engine, but I'm just going to put it in there so that I can give it to the king so he won't take the stuff that's really important to me. Very, very clever game. Really interesting take on engine building. Really enjoyed a lot. It's really kind of flown under the radar. Probably of all these games that I'm about to talk about, it's absolutely phenomenal, stellar. Really, really interesting game. Milestones. Alrighty, we're halfway through. Let's move on to number 5. The Gates of Loyang. At the Gates of Loyang from designer Uwe Rosenberg. This is a wonderful game, and while many people would be surprised that some of the other Uwe Rosenberg games are not, from his Harvest trilogy, are not on this list, to me, Gates of Loyang is definitely Uwe's best, most interesting, most compulsive engine building game, because that's what you're doing. In this game, the engine you're building is a supply and demand system, because we are all merchants, just who've set up shop at the Gates of Loyang, the big city in China, in ancient China, and we're selling we're vegetable salesmen. We're selling beets and squash and all this sort of stuff. But the interesting thing is, the engine is 2 parts. What we are building up for ourselves are fields that we can plant crops in so that we can grow, so we have more squash. But we are also, that's one half of the game. The other half of the game is trying to attract customers who want to buy our property, our vegetables that we're making. And so you have this very, very interesting system where on the one hand, you're trying to create this little agricultural empire, but on the other hand, you're trying to attract the people who will buy that stuff. And once you get the right stuff, once you get because these customers who come to buy your goods, they become repeat customers. Once you've got them in place, and I really need some radishes and some squash. I'm going to need this for the next 5 weeks. Well, you know what? That's perfect, because I've set myself up so that I've got a field producing radishes and a field producing squash, and they're going to run for the next, oh no, they're only going to run for the next 4 weeks. My engine's going to break down. For the next 4 out of the 5 weeks, everything's going to go great, because my little engine of supply, I'm producing these goods, is going to be met by the other half of my engine, the people who buy it and generate victory points for me. But I can see on the 5th week, I'm not going to have enough squash anymore. What do I do? Do I kind of break my engine down? Do I suffer some negative points? Do I prepare for that in the future? If I'm going to have to get some more squash to take care of that 5th, then I really need to be thinking beyond that, because after I produce that last squash, I'm going to have a whole bunch extra squash lying around. So I have to evolve my supply and demand engine again, so that I'll have another customer in the future who wants my excess squash. And so it's an incredibly intricate puzzle of a game, because you have to spend an equal amount of time focusing on the production and the supply. And the demand, and Jen, I just absolutely love it to bits. Absolutely adore it. Wonderful, wonderful game. Number 5, Gates of Loyang. And now on to number 4. This is the newest game on the list. Actually, we've only got it about a month ago from Queen Games, but man, this is really rocketed. This is one of the best games we played in 20. I mean, really, really. Why am I enough preamble? Queen's Architect is an amazing engine building game. Now, what is the engine in Queen's Architect? Well, basically, players in this game are competing to become the Queen's Architect. And our engine is the fact that every player has a coterie of artisans, brick masons and woodworkers and seamstresses and glass blowers and all kinds of stuff. And those artisans are your engine, because what you're doing in this game is traveling around the countryside, going to town, and running your engine, which is your group of artisans who you have trained and built up and taken care of, and made sure you paid attention to their morale and all that stuff, by letting them rest at the local inn and maybe doing some day jobs here and there to get some money so you could travel where you need to go. But what eventually happens is you run your engine to build some major work in a town, and that means your engine, which is your artisans, they are this interesting kind of clockwork mechanism that when you run your engine and say, everybody, work on building this building so I can score X, D, Y points, yay! They all rotate, because they're all like these little hexagon counters. They all rotate clockwise, and that means after the engine has been run and they've all done their work, they have all completely changed state. Half of your engine before you're about to build, they might be rip roaring ready to go, and they're going to produce a really, really high quality end product. And your other half, they might be, well, they're kind of just barely driven along, they're exhausted, they're tired, they're not really going to produce very much. But then after you run the engine and they've all rotated, things could be completely different. Suddenly your star guy, he might quit because you've pushed him too far, and your engine kind of breaks down and you have to replace him because he's such a central cog. And somebody who was a real slacker who didn't produce much, he might get his second wind, or he might find his inspiration, and suddenly he was the weak link in your engine, but now he's the centerpiece, because you're going to run your engine, which is to say, this group of artisans several times over the course of the game to build several different buildings all over the countryside. And you have to be thinking ahead. Okay, well, I see, if I come over to this town and I run my engine, my artisan engine here, and build that building, that means afterwards that guy is going to be exhausted, that guy's going to be exhausted, but they'll be set to the town next door. So after I'm done, if I get these guys rest, then they can set back up, and then I can move over here and I can do the next one. So you're doing all these elaborate short and long-term plans. And the thing is, you're under a lot of pressure because this is a race game. Every player has their own engine, and we're all running around trying to be the first to build in all the cities, being the first to build enough stuff to win the Queen's favor and become the Queen's Architect. It's a wonderful, wonderful game. And the reason I include it on this engine building list is because, I can't stress enough, this, probably more than any other game on here, this feels like an engine. You actually see the mechanisms turning, the gears spinning. It's a wonderful tactile feeling that gives you some really, really interesting, deep gameplay, but while still being incredibly intuitive, and it just works phenomenally. Amazing game, Queen's Architect. All right, so we're down to the final 3. Excited? All righty. Next up, Kashgar, Handler der Seidenstraße, which is Merchants of the Silk Road. I did a run through for this recently, and oh my gosh, this is an amazing game. Although fair warning, it's only available in German, and this game has a lot of text, so you have to be prepared. Well, you can watch my run through to learn more about what you can do to be able to play this game in English, because, like I said, there's just a lot of German text. But now, this is an interesting engine building game. This is a lot of people probably expected to see Dominion. For a lot of people, that is like the ultimate engine building game because your deck is an engine. Now, I said I wasn't going to talk much about why I'm not including games. Again, you can go check out the podcast for more. But the reason this deck building game does make it, and it's the only one that does, is because what's interesting about this game is you're actually simultaneously, in parallel, in this game, building 3 separate independent decks at the same time, and each one of those decks is its own independent engine. And so you are trying to sculpt these decks of cards, which represent caravans that can travel back and forth on the Silk Road. They can do all kinds of stuff. They can generate more cards for you. They can generate all kinds of goods. They can sell goods to fulfill contracts to get you victory points. And so you generally, over the course of the game, end up trying to sculpt each of these separate decks, these individual engines, to each be good at something particular, because you're adding cards, which makes them kind of slow and bloated, but then you're peeling cards out to make them tight and focused. And what's really cool is generally, if you're going to play well, you get a lot of synergy between the individual engines. So that, okay, well, this turn I'm going to run this engine because that means it's going to generate the resources that this other engine over here needs to produce the points that's really going to let me scream into the lead. And that interplay between 3 separate engines at the same time is just phenomenal. Such an absolutely wonderful game. I can't recommend it enough. I mean, I'm so bummed that we waited so many years, because it took forever for me to get some English cards so we could play this game. But a phenomenal game, absolutely stellar. Kashgar, Merchants of the Silk Road. I can only hope someday Cosmos decides, please, Cosmos, publish this in English. There are so many people around the world who would pay good money for this. I guarantee you, this would be a hit. It's so good. But anyway, that's Kashgar. Next up, number 2. We're almost done. Matthias Kramer's Glen More. Now this is at its heart, this is a tile laying game, kind of like Carcassonne, where everybody's working on their own little Scottish fiefdom, in the north. And every one of the tiles you place can produce goods, convert goods to resources, get more chieftains so you can have more, tiles to expand your overall tribe, up in Glen More and all that. But the interesting thing about this game is this collection of tiles, this little region of Scotland that you're building. Each one of these tiles, when you put it on the table, if you put it next to a previously placed tile, not only will the tile activate itself, but it'll activate all the previous tiles that you put it next to. So this is an engine building game, because you're laying your tiles out, creating an engine in front of you that is capable of, well, this portion of the engine produces these resources that this other portion of the engine can consume to convert to points and all that kind of stuff. So you're creating all this. But what's interesting is it's a very interesting spatial puzzle, because you want to do it in such a way that you can be super efficient with your plays. You want to do it so that, hey, you know what? When I place this tile, it's going to trigger 3 other tiles, and all these other tiles are going to generate goods that this other tile that got triggered will be able to convert. So you can have like these super awesome, efficient moves. And so it's a phenomenal engine building game. Again, much like Queen's Architect or Milestones, you really see this engine take physical form on the table in front of you. But the trick to this game is to build it, logistically, in terms, or orthogonal placement of tiles, so that it is an efficient engine, because it builds on the strengths of what has come before. It's a really clever game, absolutely phenomenal. Love, love, love Glen More, number 2. And then finally, this stack's about to fall over. Number 1, as far as I'm concerned, the ultimate engine building game, Martin Wallace's London. And the reason I say this is the ultimate engine building game is because, more than any other thing on here, you're building an engine. What you're doing in this game is players are all helping rebuild London after the Great Fire of, what was it, 1888, I think? I think that's what it was. And so everybody has, over the course of the game, you have a handful of cards. This is a hand management game where you discard some cards to be able to build other cards, and these cards all represent, famous landmarks of London over the last, 150 years. And, over the course of the game, London goes from, just almost destroyed city to, the kind of successful modern metropolis it is. So you get this really wonderful sense, and you see London spread over the map. But what's interesting is, as you play cards, you play them to an area in front of you. And on your turn, you're either, which represents your engine, again, for prosperity. An engine that can produce money, that can produce victory points, that can produce poverty as well. Because, there's all these different components that your engine will build. But your engine can also be designed so that it helps combat poverty in addition to creating poverty. You can really customize your engine depending on what cards you get and what cards you play. But the thing is, you play all these out and it just sits there. until you decide on a turn, you know what, instead of playing cards, this turn, I'm going to run my city. That's literally what it's called. You run your city. You run your engine. It's like you turn the ignition on your car, and it goes, and off it goes. And then that's when you get to see your engine come to life, because you activate all these cards from left to right, and you've set it up so that, okay, well, when I activate it, this thing will dovetail into this thing, and these two things combined will do this, and then this, and this. And then after the engine has been run, have to flip all your cards and your engine is gone. Poof! Unless you build the engine in such a way that certain elements, the elements that you really care about, can stick around so that they can be rerun over and over again. You could build almost a perpetual motion engine that never goes away, that you can run over and over and over again. Or you can focus on an engine that gives you a lot of short-term goals, but then is constantly resetting itself, so you're constantly having to build it and upgrade it. It's an incredibly compulsive and satisfying game, and more than any other one. I mean, at no point, I believe, in the rulebook does it actually mention the word engine. I mean, because none of these do. Because engine building, like I said up front, is not really a genre of game. It's just a kind of an esoteric mechanism which just represents, hey, I have created something in the game, and at certain points in the game, the thing I've created will produce something. That, in its heart, that's what an engine building game is. And for me, nobody does it better than London. Nobody gives a stronger feeling of, I have built this engine, let me start it up and see how well it goes. Phenomenal. Absolutely love London. Love all these games. They're all fantastic. I mean, engine building is a wonderful, even though I don't necessarily recognize it as a meaningful definition of gameplay. I mean, heck, you guys made me do it, so these are the ones that work for me. Now, like I said, up front, there's a lot of games that people are saying, well, hey, where's X, Y, and Z? You can listen to my podcast. It'll be coming later in the month. If you want, you can subscribe to my podcast by just going to http://podcast.rahdo.com, or you can search for it on iTunes and stuff like that. So that'll be coming soon. And as promised, there's one more thing waiting for you. You guys have waited, listened to me blather on for a half an hour. Where's Jen? That's what we want. Well, Jen's not ready yet. She's doing other stuff right now, but we will be filming that soon, and I'll splice it all together. So take it away, Honey Pie. And maybe not. Sorry to say, actually, I've been trying to get Jen for 2 weeks now, just about 10 days, to sit down and actually think about her favorite engine building games, and it's taken me quite a while, and I eventually did it today. And so Jen's actually got a few she's ready to talk about, but as it happens, she's having a horrific hair day. The humidity's just through the roof today, and she's like, I do not want to take the time to fix my hair for this video today.
I've got glass to make.
She has a lot of glass to make. She's way behind from our trip to Zomerspell. So she has, and I think they're actually very interesting choices. So we are going to talk about them, and Jen is just right there, and she will speak from off camera because, I don't know, I have bad hair days all the time and I film myself, but Jen has a little bit more sense than me. So honey, what do you want to talk about? Okay. And these are in no particular order, right?
Right.
All right.
Okay, so first one's Last Will.
Last Will. Now this is actually interesting. I mean, I have to admit, this one, I don't know why when I was making my list, it didn't even occur to me, but I think you could actually make a strong, so why is this on your list, Honey Pie?
My reason for it is that you set up your friends, and you use them over and over and over again. In fact, you recruit your friends, or you put them to work early in the game, and they can make a huge difference as to what you actually accomplish. So your engine in this game is basically a social network. Yes. A social network of ne'er-do-wells, and the sole purpose of your engine is, it's a destitution engine, basically. It's a share the wealth. It's a social redistribution network. There you go. Which is certainly very interesting thematic. I mean, it's a really fun game, and honestly, until Jen mentioned it, I don't know why, because when I was thinking about myself, I was thinking, well, yeah, I know there's the houses and they depreciate over time, but that's really kind of outside of your control once you set it up. It is still an engine. I mean, all this stuff, the people, you can create combo chains of people who, coincide with trips and with other people. And so actually, I think this is actually a really good choice. And I'm really kind of embarrassed I didn't think of it. Well, and also with your real estate ventures, there's a real estate agent and stuff. So yeah, I think it could definitely be called an engine. The destitution engine of Last Will is one of Jen's. She has two more she wants to mention. Okay. All right. Next up is Twa. And why, Honey Pie? Because you put your apprentices... Her hair looks okay, by the way, but she's... what can you say? Anyway, go on. Okay. What, you all want to wait for me to get ready? Say no.
All right.
Anyway, you set your apprentices to work and you select what kind of jobs would be most beneficial for your game plan, and then you actually can use them. And there's a bit of luck as far as the dice that you roll and if you actually get to start your engine, but quite often, because you can also switch dice around in this game with your opponents, that you can actually get your engine working pretty smoothly and efficiently and quickly.
Yeah, I have actually done run-throughs for all the games, the 3 games, 4 games maybe, depending if Jen wants to mention another one that that Jen wants to talk about. So you can see my run-throughs for more. But you know, this was an interesting one, and I really considered it too. Because I mean, well, it's interesting. The engine, or the framework for the engine, is kind of built for you at the beginning of the game because, you know, randomly you're going to get all these cards that are put into play, and these are all the different components. And over the course of the game, more potential engine pieces will get revealed, but they're not parts of your engine until, as Jen says, you assign apprentices to them. But even then, it's still not a functional engine until you act. Dice in this game are effectively the petrol. They're the fuel that runs your engine. So you do have to have the right dice at the right time to pump them into your engine with the different combinations where you put your apprentices all over the city to get out whatever you want, whether it's points or money or making money to convert into points or renown to, or you know, or working on the cathedral or fighting things. So I think this is a really good one as well, and I considered it. And I ultimately didn't put it on for a reason that's similar to Jen's last choice, which you want to mention that one?
Okay, yes. Well, this is the first one that popped to mind for me, obviously.
That's true. And I'm sure this one pops to mind for a lot of people immediately. And I'm sure a lot of people are saying, why wasn't Dominion on your list? Well, it's on Jen's list. And honey, why is this on your list of favorite engine building games?
I adore...
From an engine building perspective, not just how much you love it.
Because there's something so extremely satisfying when you get a run of cards that all work beautifully together and your turn just sings. And that's it. That's when your engine is tuned and running. Yeah,
and it's true. I mean, you know, Jen loves nothing more than to build crazy combo chain things where, oh, I'll do this, and it lets me draw 3 more cards. It gives me 2 more actions. Oh, and a buy. You can use the third item, and she just loves that.
I do.
You know, obviously... Well, I was going to talk more about this in the podcast, which I'm going to be filming later this week, or recording later this week. The reason Dominion and most deck builders didn't make it for me, and so I will put this back to Jen. Yes, there's no doubt about it. You actually build an engine. Your deck is an engine that, here's the problem with it. Here's why I did not put it on the list. It's a terrible engine. Imagine, if you will, the engine for a car. And sometimes when you try to start your car, the engine starts going and you can make your car go. But sometimes when you start the engine of your car, the radio turns on. Or maybe sometimes the windshield wipers go. Or sometimes maybe the radio turns on and the car can go. And you never really know exactly what your engine's going to do. That, by definition, is a terrible engine. And while you might have built an engine that's capable of doing all these things, you never know what it's going to do. And that's why I left Dominion, and really pretty much all deck builders, off the list. Because, yeah, you're building an engine, but it's a terrible, horrible engine that you would not want to have in real life. You know, I did mention, what do you call it? Kashgar, which is arguably a deck builder as well, but that's a deck builder where you can see the entire deck laid out in front of you and you have a lot of control. I mean, it's very, very specific. And so ultimately, that's why I left Dominion. And do you think I'm crazy, honey, or do you think there's any... Because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to argue the merits of our individual choices.
No, I think that you are being too hard on Dominion, because even if you put the key in the ignition and the car doesn't start and you go off, you're still being sheltered. You can still see out the windscreen. You can still maybe listen to the radio or recline your chair or whatever. I mean, it's still, you still got something there that's fun and is doing something for you.
Yes.
Whether it actually moves and the horn honks
Yeah.
may or may not be important to that particular turn.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and the problem is, I mean, all 10 of the games I did give you a lot of very specific control. I mean, you're building an engine to your specifications to achieve what you want to do. And maybe there's elements in the game that maybe try to tear that engine down, like in Milestones, you know, or maybe the situation of the game changes, so you need to modify your engine to do something early in the game and something else later in the game. But it's always your engine. In this game, it's its own engine. It has a mind of its own. You put that on the list, you could put dungeon pets on the list because, well, yeah, every little pet you're growing is an engine. It's an engine of consumption. But, it's not your engine because you have no control over it. You have to respond to it.
You have in control because you're buying the cards that are going into your deck.
Yeah, but there's no guarantee the cards are ever going to come out. And it can, and you're right. That's what makes Dominion so much fun is, the roller coaster ride. Sometimes it gives you what you want, and sometimes it just spits in your face and says, I'm not working today, pal. and to a certain extent, that's your problem. That's your fault because you haven't necessarily built the best engine because, of course, half of Dominion is not putting stuff into your engine, but pulling stuff out, so you have a better chance to get what you want.
Yep.
But that's ultimately why I didn't, and I'm sure probably most of you viewers at home agree with Jen and disagree with me. It's the ultimate engine building game, and I would say it is a great engine building game if you want to build a really lousy engine, a really unpredictable engine. Now, when Jen was thinking about this, she had one more thing she wanted to mention, because I had explained to her, this is what an engine building game is, and we talked about different games, and really the first one you thought of was Magic the Gathering. Yeah. Because, of course, Magic the Gathering is another deck building game, but the interesting thing is, I point out, I don't really think that fits because when you're playing Magic, you're not building your deck. You built your deck outside of Magic. In fact, these days, you don't even have to deck build. You can just buy pre-built decks for you, and you just sit down and you just see what the game throws your way. And so I didn't really know about it, but then Jen said, yeah, but what about Millennium Blades? She didn't remember the name of it, but she did remember it. I have to admit, I totally forgot. I did a run-through for Millennium Blades a couple of months ago. It was a game on Kickstarter, which is a really interesting one. And if it occurred to me, I might have actually mentioned this one because Millennium Blades, well, why did you mention it, honey?
Oh, because it's very much like Magic the Gathering, but part of the game itself is building your deck.
Yeah, and arguably that's almost the biggest part of the game, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really brilliant for that because it does. It's a different type of deck builder where the deck building, i.e. engine building, is done in real time, which is very cool, very, very unique. None of the games I mentioned, I can't think of any other real-time engine building game that's out there. Maybe if you want to, at a stretch, you could maybe say Galaxy Trucker, but I think that's way too much of a stretch. That's the problem with engine building. You could really stretch and fit almost, But anyway, but Millennium Blades is a really cool one because 2/3 of that game is building an engine in real time under real pressure through this whole economic sub-game of buying and selling on a shared market. And if Jen sells something to the market, I could buy it. And but you're focusing on that. You're also focusing on what's for sale, and you're always. That game is interesting because it gives you very clear goals right up front. The engine you're building is not this kind of laissez-faire, well, I'll see what I can get and I'll just put it all together. You have very specific goals of what you're trying to build because you get a few key cards that you try to build your entire engine around. And then the final 30% of the game is, okay, well, we've done it. Now let's actually go to the tournament and see how well our engine worked. And yeah, it's a really interesting one. If anything, I would say Millennium Blades is a better engine building game than Dominion because again, it fulfills my personal thing about you build a deck, but in that game the deck is very small and you have access to all of it. You have total control over how that engine will play out. Yeah. You build it under very strict, very high pressure. It's a fun game. It's really, really cool. It will be coming out to retail probably later this year or early next year. But you are building in real time, but then your engine is completely laid out. You have all the cards available to you and you play them one at a time in whatever order you want. So you can modify your engine, you can change it on the fly based on the scenarios that you run across when you get to the the tournament. So it didn't occur to me, but that was a brilliant one, and I gotta give my hats off to Jen for thinking of it because I totally forgot about it because I was only thinking about retail games. But anyway, so that was Jen's input. 4 games of note: Dominion, Troyes, Last Will, and Millennium Blades. So there you go, folks. That's 14 fine engine building games you might want to check out. And I think that's going to be it. I'll see you all again for another top 10 next month in July. Who knows what it'll be? The voters will decide shortly. And in the meantime, if you'd like to hear some more, other games, like why didn't I put Agricola on the list or whatever, or Race for the Galaxy or whatnot, my podcast will be coming probably in the next week or so, where I will dig deeper. So if you have any engine building games you thought I missed or that Jen missed, and you're like, come on, mention them in the comments, and if I agree with you or disagree with you, we'll talk about it in the podcast coming shortly. And so that's it, folks. Wait, Jen has something else to say.
Isn't the answer to everything Race for the Galaxy?
Is the for you the answer to everything is Roll for the Galaxy?
Roll for the Galaxy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Honey, your favorite game these days is Roll for the Galaxy. Well, no, we'll talk about Roll for the Galaxy / Race for the Galaxy / San Juan / Puerto Rico, etc., in the podcast. So that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later. Sorry I was a little late on this, but
it's all my fault.
But I think it was worth waiting for because Jen had some very, very good suggestions. I was very, very impressed. It took a while. We had to sit down here for like a half an hour. It's like, right, explain this to me. What is an engine builder game? All right, well, how did that game work? Was this game? No, and, because Jen doesn't memorize all the games, but still, I think we came up with 4 very good additions, including the one I did 2 of them I didn't even think of. So. Thanks a lot for your help, Honey Pie.
Pleasure.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to you later. So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.